Hey, I'm JD. Welcome to my channel. Please subscribe and please hit like. And today we're going to be reassembling and testing this very old Waltham Pocket watch. It was provided to me by a gentleman out of Nova Scotia, Canada for repair and servicing. Hey out there in YouTube land, I'm JD. Welcome to my channel. Please subscribe and please hit like if you've got the time. It helps my channel. And today we're going to be reassembling a Waltham Pocket watch. It's old, it's beautiful, and it's going to be working exceptionally well. I know it. Okie dokie, the first job here is to pull all the parts out. And I've got the basket here. This has been drying for quite some time now. And the reason for that is I was addressing family issues and really couldn't get at this watch work for quite some time now. So now I've got the family issues largely addressed. So now we can deal with this watch. These little containers are kind of cute. They're not that difficult to open. You just have to take a screwdriver here, put the blade in the edge, and then rotate it, and it pops the container open. I always spill the parts out. That way I'm not missing any parts, and look inside and make sure there's no screws or anything left over. The other thing is I do clean the screws sometimes, and sometimes I don't, but these screws here are matched up nicely with the bridge for the pallet fork. So I made sure I have those in the same little container so I don't have issues here. And there we go. Let me just put this right over the top because that's where it's going to end up. And there's the cannon pinion all lined up nicely for this, and that's number one. And I'll snap that back together. And then the next one is a couple of wheels, I believe, that are in there. Take them out very carefully. You don't want to subject the wheels to any undue stress as you work on them. So pull them out and put them down. There we go. And I've got nothing else in there. And it's always necessary to dump the cage, the basket, as you will likely screw up here. So if you don't, so here I'm dumping the basket again. And what do I have here? I've got ratchet wheels, and I've got click wheels. I've got all kinds of stuff here. So there we go, and there's two different screws for this. They shouldn't be difficult to match up, but I've got this here, and this here belongs over, I don't believe it belongs over here, and this here then belongs over here, and then usually the bigger screw is the one for the wheel here, click wheel, and the one that goes over the mainspring, and the other screw is over here for the crown wheel. So, or the ratchet wheel, I should say. Naming parts is always difficult for me because I don't name them as I'm doing the work. So I could look it up and show you though. So there we go. That's another basket emptied. And then grab this basket, try to keep my fingies away because this has been through the cleaning machine. I have a Pearl cleaning machine from India. The only adaptation I needed to do for it was the plug needed to be changed to a North American plug. So the plug was not North American. There's some more wheels here. And just take these out. There we go. And I needed to do that, and I did that, and the thing works beautifully now. So get this baskets are all empty, so I can put them back in here. There we go. And then the last one is this one here, and I didn't have anything in here. Surprisingly enough, there we go. And I'd already done the work on the mainspring, and I haven't done any work on the hands. But that's already done. Some of the stuff I've already done. I haven't done any work yet on the balance. So I'm going to just lift this out and then very carefully put it down here. That's the balance right there, but I'm going to put it back a bit. And I haven't done any work on the balance yet, so that'll have to be cleaned. And the watch itself, the case, it's good. It's got a dust ring for the case that's been cleaned. The face I cleaned with Rodico, and there's the case here, and that's in very good condition. And then I've got case screws, and here's the mainspring out of its position. There's the mainspring, and that goes right in there like that. It's already been taken apart. I just have to make sure it's put together properly again. And that goes in like this, and this is the center arbor for the mainspring. It's going to go on the side. Then I've got all the various screws that are used for the balance. So this screw here, by itself, is for the balance. These screws here are used for the 3 different plates, 2 plates that are screwed onto the main plate. So I'll put these screws alongside their brothers. Back this up a bit here, like so. And these screws generally are the same type screw, so I don't have to worry about having the wrong screw in there. And there's 3 screws in this plate and 3 screws in that plate, and that's good. And then these screws here are used for holding the movement in place in the case. I'll put those over there. I have the pallet fork. I clean the pallet fork on its own. I don't clean that in the watch cleaning machine. And then the hands, I'll just leave the hands in there for now. Keep them all safe. And I've got the movement cover here, so I'll just put that over with the movement and the screws. And so we pretty much have everything laid out here for reassembly now. I just have to align the arbor and do that properly. So we're going to get on with this. Let me just put this away. This is for my Pearl watch cleaning machine. Like I said, it's a great machine. I just had to make sure that the plug was correct, because they had some plug from India on there, and that was wrong. I had to make sure there wasn't any problem with that either. So I keep this in a box. It's an old box I have for a wireless charger, and that way when I transport this basket, I have the basket in the box. I don't have to concern myself with dropping it or accidentally shaking it too much or whatever. I get it in the box, nice under control. So there we go. So now I'm ready for reassembly, and in reassembly, I'm chatting through the video today. I hope you're okay with that. But I'm going to use the Myers number 58 movement holder here. Your third hand, and I use a separator. I just use an old business card to separate the two here. And that's the Myers number 58 movement holder. It's a really, really highly recommended, great movement holder. These things usually sell for $300 to $400. If you're lucky to get one cheap, then God bless you. Say, insert the movement, press the thumb screw on A, and slide the base B to the desired position. To remove the movement, thumb screw on A, press the fingers, base, and reinsert. Likewise, it's your third hand. Save 25 to 50% of your time by the use of this movement holder. So I'm not sure if that's true, but I know that it holds on to the movement nicely. So when I place the movement into the movement holder, and I've got these adapters on here for larger movements. When I place this movement, I'm going to put my gloves on here. Hold on. I always claim I do the Bugs Bunny to get the gloves working properly. There we go. I needed to do a little more Bugs Bunny today. So put the gloves on here, and I usually have the gloves on one hand and the other hand is free because I need to use this hand for screwdrivers, etc., etc. But just to keep things nice and clean, I've got it like this. So, and there we go. So that's kind of set up, and we'll get at the actual reassembly of this movement in a few seconds. All right, this is the assembly of this very nice old Waltham Pocket watch. Here I'm keeping the setting mechanisms in place while I actually remove the jewel setting here. And I want to be oiling this jewel setting. It's been cleaned already. I had a look at it. It was spotless, so there was no issue there at all. So I'm just putting a witness mark here, so when I put the cap jewel back on, I know exactly where it goes. I couldn't take it off that way, so I just punched it out with a stick, and here I'm just oiling the setting here appropriately. And I'm turning the plate for the movement around, so when I reinstall the jewel setting, it's in the right position. Push that down so it's completely in the right position. I oiled it on the setting itself, but it's going to push down on the cap jewel, so there shouldn't be an issue there. And then I put the screws back for the setting, one at a time. This is pretty precise work that you have to do this, but you got to make sure you do it very carefully so you don't scratch anything. So here, that's all ready. There's my winding mechanisms and setting mechanisms, and I'm putting a little bit of oil in the hole that where the mainspring barrel goes. So a little bit of oil there. There's different grades of oil I put. So the more friction, the thicker the grade of oil. That's how you do it. So I'll put maybe a 90-10 where the balance is, because that's very light, and use a heavier oil in the other areas of the watch. So especially in the setting mechanisms, you're using more like a grease than an oil, and you don't want the oil to travel. So here I'm pushing that in, and it's not quite flat, so I think I've got to take that out again. Make sure it's flat and through, and then put it back in, and there we go. And then the next thing I do after I've got that done is oil. I put a little bit of oil in the inside, and this is because the gear shaft will ride against that jewel a bit, so just a tad of oil there. Now what I want to do is reassemble the gears one at a time. So that's the escapement gear, that's the fourth wheel I just put in, and this is the intermediate wheel that goes in. And then I put in the center wheel here, it goes straight down with the pipe, the longer pipe sticking out. So that's all aligned, and I'm using a Breguet stick to just help me hold things in place with the plate. Put the plate down, and then I lightly put the screws in. I don't tighten them yet. I tighten them later. So I put the screws in very lightly, and then once the screws are in, I'm able to put the ratchet wheel and the other wheel, the click wheel, in place, and then that allows me to actually run the train to make sure that the whole thing runs properly. So this is a little bit tricky. You got to make sure the pivots are going through the holes. So I lift it up sideways and look at it, and I'm putting the screw in just lightly so the plate stays in place. And then I will tweak the, there we go, I'm just sort of tweaking the gears here to make sure the pivot falls in. And once I do that, very carefully with very light motion, right? Don't do it very heavy on that, or you'll break a pivot, and you don't want to do that. So once I got that in place, I use my Breguet stick to hold things down as I tighten that. So those are now tight, but they're just snug. They're not really tight. Then I put the various wheels in, and the ratchet wheel, and then the crown wheel, ratchet wheel, and I put those in place, and that allows me to wind and set the watch. So here we go, a little bit of oil on the inside, because that's where the friction is going to be on the second wheel that goes on the inner part of that. And there we go, put that in, put the screw in. This one is righty-tighty, lefty-loosey, so some of them are the other way around for that particular wheel. So I line that wheel up there, the click spring's in place, and then I tighten that. And you can actually wind the watch from that screw. So I gave it a little bit of a wind, and you can see the wheel turning. And then what I do is I hold that, and there we go. So I run the train, make sure it runs well, and there we go. So the watch is together nicely. Put oil on the actual jewels, and we're ready to go, folks. All right, that's enough overdubbing for me for today. So now I've got to tighten the plate screws completely, because I didn't tighten them completely initially. I just made them snug, and I want to make sure they're tightened completely. That way the plate is not going to go wandering anywhere. I like to leave it a little bit loose when I put it all together and run the train. And by loose, I don't mean loose. I mean they're snug but not tight. So you can see I'm just doing a little bit of a turn there on these. There we go. So now that's good. I ran the train. You saw me do that, and the escapement wheel spun very nicely. And now I'm going to assemble the. I'm going to put in the pallet fork. But before I put the pallet fork in, I'm going to use this kind of a gel. It's 9415. So it's Breguet 9415, and it's used to prevent friction. So when it compresses, it prevents friction, and then it decompresses and the gel goes back to where it was. So what I need to do is actually take the pallet fork here. I'm going to put it on a piece of Rodico so I can make sure it's relatively steady. And then I'm going to oil the end of the pallet fork. I don't know if you've ever seen anyone do that before, but it improves the actual performance between the pallet fork jewel and the feet on the escapement wheel. So I almost did the wrong thing here. Do pay attention. A friend of mine was putting his sea-doos in the water on the weekend, and he got distracted by someone who came over to visit him. And the guy was talking away, and he thought, just talk with him or whatever. And he plugged the minus into the plus, and then he plugged the plus into the minus. There we go. Ended up burning out his solenoid. So he was really pissed off. He had two sea-doos. One of them was working. I said, "Hey, Tim, where's the other one?" He goes, "Well, I did something really stupid." And he's a smart guy. Owns his own HVAC company. And does very good work. He did work for me at once, and a really nice guy. And he just wasn't paying attention. And so you really got to pay attention when you're doing things. Otherwise, you'll screw it up. And I think anyone who's done work on watches before understands that. Trying to be quiet for a second. There we go. The pallet fork is in place, and now I just need to put in the bridge for it. It's not a balance cock or a cock, it's called a bridge. So if it's only one screw one-sided, it's called a cock. That's why they call it a balance cock. So it's a British term. British term. Those British people have a different word for everything. There, I think I've got it. Never quite sure. So when you put this back in, you need to put the screws in, but don't tighten them down too much yet. So I can see the pivot for the pallet fork just sticking up. I'm going to drop this on the mat here so I can properly align this. And once I've got one in, I'm usually pretty good because it tightens up nicely. I can hear my wife coming home at this very moment because I can hear the garage door opening. Yes, sir. Siri bub. That's 1. Now let me just see if the pallet fork is free here. Yes, it is. Always a good thing. Now I'm going to be measuring the beat error on this watch as well. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to put the balance in, and then I'm going to look at what side the pallet fork is closer to with respect to the banking pins, and then I'll be able to understand which side which way to rotate the collet for the hairspring in order to get the best. There's almost near zero beat error, and beat error, you can think of it as the rotational error clockwise versus counterclockwise. If it's rotating the same amount clockwise as it is counterclockwise, then you have zero beat error. But if it's not, then you have beat error, which makes timing of the watch a little trickier. So there we go. So that's nice there. And so this would be the pallet fork at rest, which means that the balance cock will, or the balance and the jewel, the impulse jewel, will kind of fit in the slot. And then I take the power off the watch, and it'll rest in a certain direction. So first what I want to do is put a little bit of power on the watch here. I can do this just by turning the ratchet wheel, and then when I touch the pallet fork, it's going to go either on the left or right. Let me just nudge it here. There we go. There we go. Now I can put the balance cock and the balance in position and see where the beat error is. I'm going to give it a little wind from the side here with my bench key. There we go. That'll ensure it banks properly there. And now when I put the balance in, the question is, which side will the jewel rest between the banking pins? So this is a very tricky job putting the balance back in. I'm hanging on to it a bit. This part always makes me the most nervous because I've got to enter it from this side and then twist it around like so. And I do a little bit of hoping with a little giant side order of praying. And I always keep my hands on the sides just to make sure that the pocket watch, the balance doesn't fly off. So that doesn't look like it's working. So the safest thing to do here is to take the balance back off again. Like that. Then re-enter. Yeah, this is as all the watchmakers out there know, this is the most painful part of putting the pocket watch back together again, because you're trying to line everything up, and nothing ever wants to line up perfectly. There we go. I've got some ticking going on here, which is always good. And what I want to do is just look at where the impulse jewel stays at rest. And this, of course, doesn't have a full wind on it. And I'll just take the power off of the movement. Just moving the click spring out of the way, or the watch click actually out of the way. And let it wind down a bit. And you can see the balance is kind of just at rest right now. So now what I want to do is look through a microscope through the edge here. So if I looked at this angle going through, or if I look directly at you see how the balance is just wobbling back and forth? That's perfect. Now I align the upper balance jewel with this jewel, do a straight line there, and I can see where the impulse jewel rests between the pins. So, and I'll know whether it's left or right if I have a significant bead error. I think I may also, well, I'll just look at it and tell you. Alright, here's an old picture I used before to explain this. In this situation here, I just looked at this all. I was looking at it from this direction here, and this arm was closer to this. It was closer to this banking pin there. So in order to straighten it up, I would have to move the wheel, the balance wheel, counterclockwise. So, which means I have to move the hairspring collet clockwise in order to correct it, and just by the slightest amount. So I think that's how it works. So if I move the collet clockwise, I'm putting tension on that, but I'm pulling this counterclockwise by doing that. So that's what I have to do. So if it's on this side, right, you want to move it this way, just like the arrow I have here from before, and to move this way to have the arm of the pallet fork dead center, right, I need to meet, and that's a counterclockwise movement. That means I need to move the collet clockwise ever so slightly. So we're going to just jog that clockwise ever so slightly and then remeasure. Alright, I took the balance out here and I've got it on this balance tack, but I think I'm going to move it to a different balance. I think I might move it to a different balance tack. Oh, actually I may leave it there. Only because the arm of this sits nicely in there, so it's kind of configured nicely. I just need to move this back a bit so it's aligned. And I think I'll have to lower this a bit so I don't have to so when I get in there I can actually adjust this with stability. I think I might. Not sure yet. Let me just see what kind of space I have. And what I'm doing here is I'm attacking this from the top, and I'm putting my screwdriver blade into the slot of the collet like this, and I wanted to move this clockwise. So to move this clockwise, I actually have to move the balance counterclockwise with control. So if I go in the hole here, Just move this out of the way a little bit. There. I moved it ever so slightly clockwise. So you just, so you can see, you go in through the top like this, and I've got some control with this tack because it's got slots in it where I can actually hold the balance in place while I do that activity. So now I'm going to put it back in and test it and see where I sit. Again, I've got to put a little bit of power on the watch in order to get the pallet fork to lean on the right banking pin. I usually like entering it from the side, so which means I've got to just rotate the movement in the Myers number 58 movement holder, just so I can get the watch here. I just push in and then wind like that, and then I want to line this up so I can bend, like tilt the actual movement slightly as I'm doing this. So I'll just tighten this up. I'm going to do this very carefully. This part always makes me nervous. I don't know if the other watchmakers out there feel the same way, but I always get nervous when I'm working with a balance like this. I've worked with some pretty interesting balances. So I'm going to tilt this. There we go. So the pallet fork is towards the inside, and I'm going to come in at an angle here, just steadying this with my hand. I'm going to look straight down and see if I can see the hole where the screw goes in. That way I know I'm aligned perfectly. There we go. That fell in place, and I've got movement, which is good. So I need to relax for a second. So what I want to do is now take the power off the watch and look where the balance, the impulse jewel actually rests between the banking pins. So I'm going to put the screw back in here very carefully, putting a little pressure on here so it doesn't bounce out. I may actually test the bead error here as an alternative. There we go. Wind it up a bit more and then test the bead error and see what I got. Because if I've got perfection, then there's no more to do. I did jog it ever so slightly to one side, so hopefully that corrected the bead error, and we'll see what happens here. I'll put even more power on the mainspring here. The other thing I might let this do is run overnight. So I do that quite often. I just let it run overnight, and that way it settles in. And once it's settled in, then you can complete the reassembly, because you know you've got a pretty good amplitude, and bead error is decent. So the other thing I can do as well is take a video of it and see what the bead error looks like from a video perspective in slow-mo. So using my iPhone, there, I just took a quick video of the balance moving, and I'll be able to see what this looks like. It says it's preparing the video. No, it would take that long. And not too bad. It's not 365 degrees, but it's pretty good. I also need to demagnetize the watch as well, the movement. So, and that's just one click to demagnetize it. And you can tell if it's magnetized by my little compass. If I just put my compass here on the top of the balance, and I see the balance rattling around, then it's magnetized, and it looks good. Looks like there's pretty much zero movement on that, so there's no magnetism involved. That's excellent. And then I'm just going to measure it before I take the power off, and just measure and see what it's doing with respect to beat error. So without making any adjustments, my beat error is 3.1. That's a bit too high. I have my LA at 52, and it might not be right. I'd have to adjust that. But my rate is pretty good at 30 plus 34. I can amplitude at 238 though is very good. So I've got some pretty decent amplitude on this movement now. But my beat error I don't like, so it's a 3. I'm going to try to improve that. All right, there's the watch grade. There's the watch itself, 17 joule, produced in 1910. Run quantity 1,000 of 11,900 total production. Remember, Waltham made probably 3 million watches a year, pocket watches a year. Everybody had one back in the days. They didn't have wristwatches, they had pocket watches. So that is the movement, the grade. So I'm going to check and see what the LA is for that and adjust my time grapher so that it's appropriate. All right, a little bit of a hint here. So if you go on and use AI, and I use Grok for AI, which is Elon's AI, GROK3. It's actually one of the best ones, so his company developed this, and you end up with this information. So I used Grok on my iPhone, and it said, gives me lift angles for American Waltham Pocket watches, grade 630, not explicitly listed in the standard reference, blah, 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 but it says, second paragraph for grade 630, which is a 16 size movement, a lift angle of around 42 is commonly cited for similar Waltham movements, such as the Waltham 21 Joule 645, without specific documentation. 630, a safe starting point for a time grapher would be to test at 42 degrees. This is a typical value for a 16 size movement, so that's good enough for me. There I'm holding my camera here, and as you see, I got an amplitude of 198, lift angle 42 degrees, beat error 2.9, my rate is plus 3, so I can take the blue line and the yellow line and get them closer, and that should give me a bit better amplitude and maybe correct my beat error, get it under 1. So let's take the balance cock out, take the power off the watch, take off the balance from the watch, and adjust that lift angle again, or adjust the collet again to move the arm of the pallet fork in between the two banking pins. That's how you do it. So the first thing I want to do here is align this so I can look through with my microscope and see if that arm did in fact move in the right direction. Right, so I'm just going to snug it up here. The amplitude of the watch should improve letting it run over time. So there you go. So I've got it snugged up now. And now what I need to do is remove the power from the watch. So to do that, I put in my bench key here and very carefully push the click out of the way like that. And then while I get some control over the bench key, let that wind down a bit. You can't let it sizzle away, so I find putting pressure from my palm on the end of the bench key gives me a bit more control over letting the power down. It's a tricky thing. So there we go. I let the power down. It looked like it overbanked, or it went on the other side. No, we got some movement there. Very good. A little concern there. So now to let it settle down, I'm going to look at that in the microscope and see where the arm sits. So looking at this diagram now, the arm is actually too far to the other side. So it's over here a bit more. So when I turned to call it clockwise before, now I got to turn it counterclockwise again, just a tad. So again, with the Myers number 58 movement holder, I want to move this so the balance is kind of exposed here, so I can safely remove it. And then I like to put a little bit of downward pressure on the balance cock while I loosen the screw. That way the balance cock doesn't fly off. Like that. Put that out of the way, and now I think generally this is a fairly loose fit. So now I can just take this, grab this, and tilt the pocket watch ever so slightly here, and then this comes out. I use my thumb just a bit to kind of rock it up so that it clears. Oh, I got a phone call here. It scared the crap out of me. It's probably marketing. Alright, now I'm going to have to edit that video. Anyway, so I've got my screwdriver again here. So now I've got to stick it in. I moved it clockwise that last time, so now I got to move it counterclockwise just a tad. I want to make sure this is completely clean, so I jammed the screwdriver into Rodico to make sure there was no issue at all. And if I can move this out of the way just a bit, I will. And then I've got to go down to the center without fouling anything, but I got to hold the balance in place here. There. I think that did it. It may have done it. I'm not absolutely sure. So let's put this back in the watch. Got to put a little bit of a wind on it again. Right? It's quite a long process, and if you watch other videos on it, you'll see there's no short way of doing this. You basically have to go through the process each time. And again, the risk is that you foul the hairspring while you're playing with this thing. So just get this out of the way here. There we go. And then I want to make sure the pallet fork is on that side. Let me just do that. Like that. Okay. Nice snap on the pallet fork, by the way. I'm very impressed with that. And now I've got to put the balance back in again. Every time I do this, there's a risk. There's always a risk with pocket watches. So I'm going to just put this in like this. Try to get the pivot to as close to the center as I can. Well, I actually screwed that up. I don't want to do that. I want to enter it from this side. I've got to take the pallet fork and put it on the other side. People call it overbanking, but overbanking is actually when the impulse jewel goes all the way to the other side and slams on the pallet fork on the wrong side. That's the definition of overbanking. So I just hope this is in the right place. Put my fingers there to guard. And I look down and see where the hole is. This is tricky stuff, folks. Tricky stuff. There we go. Now is that working? Yeah, there we go. So now I got it running again. And I'll put a little bit more power and I'll check the bead error again. And there again, there's no short way of doing this. Now modern watches have a little lever on them to adjust the bead error, which is a great thing. So you have the one lever just swings it just adjusts the virtual length of the hairspring, and the other lever adjusts the bead error, and that's in a modern watch. So these old watches, though, are well over 100 years old, did not have that. So put a little bit of wind. Now I'm going to tighten this up a bit, and then put this into the time grapher and see what kind of action I'm getting. As you can see, this can become very depressing as the bead error is now greater, 3.6, so I moved it too much the other way. My rate's pretty good. My bead hair is crap. So I'm going to just keep adjusting it, and I'll show you the result after I finish. So I'm just going to keep adjusting this to see what I get, and not record the adjusting technique. But I think I moved it to the other side a little too much again. So we'll just take the power off, have a look in the microscope. I just have to move it a smidgen the other way now. All right, folks. There it is. A bead error of 0. I'm just saying that is probably the best bead error I've ever got. An amplitude of 261, bead error of 0, and plus 4. My LA is a bit off here, but so my amplitude is likely going to be a bit lower, but my bead error is 0. So it took about 7 times before I was able to get it to that level of bead error. And just to show you, there's the movement right there. So there is the movement ticking away, and there is what you call a perfect bead error. Perfect bead error. I'm going to make a shorts video on this one because it's impossible, but I did it. All right, I got to record this. So there you go. My amplitude is 217, my rate's -3. I had it at 0 for a few seconds, and my bead error is 0. My lift angle is 42, so that is incredible. I can play with that rate just ever so slightly to bring that up, but my bead error is absolutely perfect. So this is a lecture on bead errors, I think. So that's it for my video today. The movement's running exceptionally well, and we'll end it now, and then we'll put the movement back together. We'll let this run overnight and put the movement back together tomorrow. So there's generally what I'm looking at. Amplitude 212, rates plus 4. I could probably get the amplitude higher if I wound it more, but my bead error is 0. Thanks a lot for watching this video. My rate's +2. This is really good news.